everyone, welcome back to B Mother Reviews. Today we're taking a look at the XM Studios Hawkman, part of their 1/6 scale DC Rebirth line. If you're saying to yourself, hey, what's up, this statue isn't even out yet, you are right. This is a pre-production sample of this statue, and it's a piece that I've been debating with myself for some time now, whether I actually want to order it or not. So if you're like me and you haven't decided yet, join me and together we will convince ourselves whether or not we need this piece on our shelf. So stay tuned for the XM Studios Hawkman preview coming up next. Alright, Hawkman is an interesting character to say the least. Now, he's a golden age character. He's been around a long time, making his debut in Flash Comics #1, which came out way back in 1940. So he's been around almost as long as superheroes themselves. On the surface, on the exterior, he's a pretty basic looking character. I mean, look at his costume. He doesn't even wear a shirt. I mean, you got the signature wings and the hawk helmet. His weapons are also quite simplistic. He has an array of medieval style weapons like a mace. Here, his signature spiked mace. He'll use a sword and shield, axes, spears, nets. If you've seen it in the movie Gladiator, he's probably used it at some point in time. He's a guy who likes to get up close and personal to his enemy and pound them to a bloody pulp. So in other words, he's awesome. But that's pretty much where the simplicity of the character ends. His backstory, after 80 plus years, is pretty complex. The first ever Hawkman is the ancient Egyptian prince known as Khufu, and together with his princess, Shiara, they discovered an alien spacecraft filled with a precious cargo of nth metal. And it's this metal that's weaved throughout his costume, his harness, his wings, that gives him his signature ability of flight. Now, Hawkman also has some enhanced strength and senses and things like that, like a typical superhero does, but flight is his main ability. Now, what makes Hawkman truly unique is that Prince Khufu and Princess Shiara, when they were killed by their mortal enemy Hathset, their souls were given the ability to reincarnate. So the spirit of Hawkman has lived on through the centuries under the guise of many different people along the way. And what's kind of neat about that is each subsequent Hawkman, once they gain their memories of their destiny, gets the knowledge and expertise of each previous Hawkman. So the current version, archaeologist Carter Hall, is truly wise beyond his years. Now, I mentioned Hawk Girl, and she also suffered the same fate of reincarnation. So each new generation of Hawkman and Hawk Girl are destined to meet each other, fall in love, and then be tragically ripped apart in some gut-wrenching fashion. So the concept of reincarnation is complex on its own, but to make matters worse, there's a completely different version of Hawkman. The Silver Age Hawkman is a completely different dude known as Qatar Hall, an alien space cop from the planet Thanagar. And these two Hawkmen, the Carter Hall and Qatar Hall, have existed separately on different Earths. They've come together. They even merged together into one being at one point. And similarly, Hawk Girl has been played by different women over the ages. And there's a Hawk Woman who's a completely different character. I mentioned the Hawk homeworld of Thanagar, filled with an entire race of Hawk people. And when you add the layers and layers of 80 plus years of comic history on top of one another, it gets pretty hard to follow. So I boil Hawkman down to one simple concept. He's a badass mother, a B-mother if you will, with a mace who don't take no crap off of nobody. And that's pretty much all I need to know about Hawkman. So what do you need to know about this statue? Well, let's find out with Sculpt and Design next. Alright, this statue is sculpted by a man named Nilo Samir, and I'll just apologize right now for likely butchering that name, but he's got a pretty nice list of projects under his belt. He's done a lot of work for Prime 1 Studios, including some of their Ninja Turtles, their Lady Maria Bloodborne statue, so this Hawkman adds to a pretty impressive portfolio. So let's take a look at the statue starting with the base, and anytime you have an ancient Egyptian theme to a statue, I'm interested. I'm absolutely fascinated by ancient Egypt, and this statue has elements of that all over it. You take a look at this crumbled pharaoh-style hawk statue beneath his feet, and the column that props him up in the air is completely carved with hawk and bird-themed hieroglyphs around its entire circumference. So very thematic for the character, and it looks awesome. Hawkman himself, I mentioned pretty basic costume for the character, and I'm happy to say that XM didn't try to do too much with it. They kept it simple. You look at his signature red and gold boots. There's some battle damage there on the front. His green pants have a nice texture to them. You got the hawk emblem on the belt, his harness, and the awesome golden hawk helmet. Now, sometimes the helmet in the comics is shown with these big bird-like eyes to it, and that might have been a neat switch-out option for this statue, but as it is, the statue comes with what you see here. Now, I am a firm believer that if you are going to go about your daily business without a shirt on, you got to have the guns to back that up, and I think this guy here has a suitable buff superhero physique. This guy is jacked up. And, Hawkman, he's kind of a rugged, burly man. So in keeping with that theme, they've given him some chest hair and some arm hair, even sculpted some hair onto his knuckles to help maintain that manly aura. He still finds time to shave his armpits, but hey, pit hair on a statue might look a little bit strange. Overall, though, the figure of Hawkman, he looks fantastic. Now, the centerpiece to any Hawkman statue is going to be the wings, and these wings look absolutely majestic. Each individual feather is detailed and textured on its own. Each one stands out and looks absolutely awesome. These wings, they're huge. They take up a big part of the statue, but they're not overwhelming at the same time. They look awesome. I like the pose they chose for this statue, reaching up into the air, launching up into flight. I like that they kept the wings kind of pinned back behind him though. You still get a really nice look at them, but they're not taking up too much space. This statue is fairly compact, so it's going to be easy to display on your shelves, which is great. One minor nitpick with this pose, he's looking up into the air, so you can't get a good look at his face unless you keep it down around eye level or lower. And I think it probably has one prime angle of display, which is from his left. You can see as you turn it, you kind of lose sight of his face a little bit. So this guy has to be displayed, I think, in a certain way, but in that way, it looks pretty good. I'm pretty impressed with the sculpt on this piece. Let's move on to paint. Alright, admittedly, it's pretty tough to judge a paint job on a pre-production sample because this is not necessarily what we're going to get in hand at the end of the day, but I can say if we get close to this, I think it'll look pretty nice. I love the metallic red and gold they used on his boots. The shade of green and the shading on his pants is also quite nice. I will point out that the stripe down his leg, depending on the series and the artist on that series, sometimes that is yellow, but other times it is green, so I can live with it the way it is now. It looks very nice. Skin tones are good. They've given some shading to all the chest and arm hair to help that stand out a little bit. More metallic gold on the harness and the helmet. It all looks very nice. The wings themselves look very good as well. I have no problems with this paint job other than the fact that maybe the wings and the base are a little bit too close in color. I think if they could shift the wings away from this color a little bit, they're often shown as a little bit more of a grayish color in the comics, just to help them stand out a little bit more from the base, for me would be ideal. But that said, if this is close to what we get in the final product, we'll be pretty happy with this paint job. Alright, production and build quality on this statue again. There's not a lot I can tell you because this statue hasn't been engineered yet and isn't close to what we're going to receive as a final product. This piece here is held together with some metal pegs and a little bit of putty as well. But I wanted to point out one thing in particular with this sample that I have here, and that is that the helmet is a separate piece. And you can see underneath they have actually sculpted and painted the face there. Now, very likely on the final piece that we get, this won't be the case. There's too much that can go wrong, like scratching the paint as you take the helmet on and off, or the helmet breaking. The helmet will likely come pre-attached to the head. And I'm very curious to see how that is implemented on the final product, because if they cast the helmet and the head as one piece, that's going to fill in all these gaps between the cheek flaps and his cheeks, between the beak and his nose, and it's going to ruin that look of a man wearing a helmet. It's going to look fused to his face. So I'm urging XM to find a way to give us this look here, a man wearing a helmet. I think it's doable, and I'm excited to see how it's implemented on the final product. All right, it's time to wrap up this preview of the XM Studios Hawkman. This is part of their 1/6 scale DC Rebirth line, and I don't consider myself the biggest Hawkman fan around, but ever since I was a kid, I've always loved the way he looks. You probably remember that old Kenner Superpowers action figure line. I was so jealous of a friend of mine who had the Hawkman. Now finally, this is a chance for me to add a Hawkman of my own. So after having this sample in hand for a few days, I think I'm leaning towards picking this guy up. And whether you're a big-time Hawkman fan or not, this statue has a ton to offer. It's got a fantastic sculpt. I love the Egyptian themed base. I like that they kept the costume simple and classic, which is just fine by me. And the wings. These wings look incredible. You get a fantastic view of them, but again, they don't take up too much space. The statue is still fairly compact. It's going to be easy to display. For me, that's absolutely imperative in any new statue I get these days, because I am pretty much out of space. So what do you think of this Hawkman? Let me know in the comments below. Make sure to stay tuned to the channel and subscribe, because we always have more stuff coming. Hopefully you enjoyed this preview of Hawkman. We'll talk to you guys soon.